Dr. Stewart says the English statistics show less than 2/3 of those vaccinated are protected.
In any outbreak of whooping cough or pertussis, about 30% of the children have been fully vaccinated.
How long is the DPT shot effective?
For 2 or 3 years from the time of receiving it.
The DPT vaccine has never been clinically tested in the United States. The British did clinical tests on the vaccine back in the late 40s and found it to be effective, but reactive. By congressional mandate in 1973, the Food and Drug Administration set up panels to review all vaccines on the market. While the report on bacterial vaccines has never been published, we were able to get a draft of it under the Freedom of Information Act. It shows that very few manufacturers of the DPT vaccine were able to give the panel any documentation that their vaccine was either effective or safe. It shows that the panel went ahead and continued licenses anyway, pending more information. And it shows one DPT vaccine that was okayed on a 3-2 vote. Dr. Mortimer was a member of that panel.
Well, here we've got a highly reputable manufacturer whose manufacturing techniques, insofar as we can tell, are impeccable, who, insofar as we can tell, does everything to monitor what happens with that vaccine as best that manufacturer can, and, moreover, a vaccine upon which the public depends. Therefore, it seems entirely appropriate to us to permit that vaccine to be produced for another period of X years.
How can a vaccine, which every child in America might be exposed to, be okayed on a 3-2 vote?
Because there was circumstantial evidence that it worked.
But a 3-2 vote?
That's a far greater majority than we elect presidents on.
There was no reason, I think, at that time to question the efficacy of the products because they were so successful. The standards of safety and efficacy that we demand for vaccines probably exceed by a great deal those standards that we have for almost everything else that we offer as medicines. Every lot that the manufacturer makes is tested both at the manufacturer and at the Bureau of Biologics.
Is that normal?
No, it reflects our concern for this vaccine.
A General Accounting Office audit in 1979 found the test FDA uses to examine those lots is faulty. An FDA panel also questioned the adequacy of current vaccine tests and noted that they are conducted on the premise that children in this country get 3 shots. In fact, most children get 4. Bobby Young, who worked at the FDA's Bureau of Biologics.
I believe that scientists at FDA would indicate to you that the mouse protection test that they employ for pertussis vaccine is not adequate.
Our analysis of the vaccine effectiveness by the laboratory test is not as is not as good as we would like, but it certainly can't be too bad since the vaccine's been so effective.
They have their own vested interest and their own authorities and experts who are being paid salaries to make this appear to be a very protective and safe vaccine. And anything that mitigates against the safety and protectiveness of a vaccine, in essence, mitigates against their recommendations.
While the government has said for years that the vaccine is effective and safe, it is working hard to try to develop a new vaccine. In fact, with the FDA's help, the Japanese rushed a new what they call pure vaccine onto the market after Japanese parents lost confidence in the old shot. That vaccine, however, has never been clinically tested, so it may be 2 to 4, maybe 10 years before it is determined to be safe enough to use here in the United States. If the government had said, look, there's a real serious problem with this vaccine a long time ago, maybe we would have had a new vaccine a long time ago.
That's perfectly possible, but the government has to establish priorities.
The fact is, we may have had a safer shot a long time ago. For many years, the Eli Lilly company produced a different type of DPT vaccine, which it called Trisologen.
It was the impression of the physicians that used the vaccine that this was the safest whooping cough vaccine on the market. I don't know if that's real. It's only hearsay evidence. It was never really quantitatively compared.
Why, if you thought that the Lilly vaccine might be less reactive and still be effective, Wouldn't you have taken a close look at it yourself to determine whether it really was a better vaccine?
We are developing a vaccine, but our primary objective is to try to understand in as precise and as modern terms as we can those components of the vaccine that cause side reactions and that also might cause immunity.
But in the case of the Lilly vaccine, is it possible that we could have let a good one get away?
Oh, I think we have no control over that. That was the decision of the Eli Lilly company to stop its manufacture.
There are some children who absolutely should not get the DPT shot. There are some children who are at serious risk if they do. We'll examine that in just a moment. The FDA is working on a new vaccine, which it hopes will be effective, but also a lot less reactive than the one that we have now. The problem is, nobody knows when that vaccine will be available. And in the meantime, parents must decide whether they will or will not give their children the DPT vaccine. We can tell you this, the disease whooping cough, pertussis, is not a pleasant disease. It lasts a long time. But from everything we have seen, it is no longer a killer, except in infants that are probably too young to receive the vaccine. We can also tell you this, some children and some families are much more at risk than others. No one knows more about that than Dan and Mary Resiniti of Binghamton, New York.
Where? Blue.
Tony Resiniti, 19 years old. He suffers a convulsion about once a day. The drugs to control his convulsions cost $1,200 a year. He has spent part of his life in an institution. Tony convulsed within 24 hours after getting the DPT shot. Regardless, doctors continued the rest of the shots. After Tony's history with the DPT shot, his brother Leo should never have had the vaccine. Leo Resiniti, 17 years old. Only a few hours after his first DPT shot, Leo too went into convulsions. His temperature soared. Regardless, his pediatrician gave him a second shot.
In terms of the severe complication, the encephalopathy, that information was all anecdote until less than a year ago, until a British study appeared.
Did he say last couple of years, 2 years?
That's what he said. Well, he said since the National and Childhood Encephalopathy study in England.
I can't speak for the whole medical community. I can only speak for myself, and I've always known that whooping cough vaccines do produce some side reactions.
We discovered while researching this story that many doctors and nurses are not aware of the risks or reactions or the warning signs that mean the DPT shot should not be given the second time.
Cost-benefit analysis.
Case in point, the District of Columbia Medical Society held a recent seminar on immunizations. When a panel of doctors and scientists was asked if a DPT shot should be given to children who have had febrile convulsions, no definitive answer was given. In fact, Dr. Saul Krugman, a well-known professor of pediatrics at New York University's Medical Center, said, a history of convulsions is not a reason to avoid the P part of the DPT shot. The people attending that meeting were misinformed. Convulsions are specifically listed by the American Academy of Pediatrics in the Pediatric Red Book as a contraindication to giving another shot. Here is what that doctor's handbook states as reasons not to give another whooping cough part of the DPT shot to your child. Had a high fever, had convulsions, went into shock, collapsed, cried excessively, lost awareness, or showed signs of brain damage. Manufacturers add that you should not give the shot to children with nervous system disorders, those undergoing chemical therapy, or who have had an infection or fever. While the American Academy of Pediatrics does not include it in its guidebook, manufacturers say you should not vaccinate a child who has a personal or family history of central nervous system disorders or convulsions, like the Resiniti family. But what about the children who have already been damaged? Who's helping them? Unless they sue, and many families don't have the money or don't want to do that, nobody is helping them pay the enormous cost that a brain-damaged child brings upon a family.
I just recently read where it's going to go up to $100 a day if you institutionalize a child like Scott. Those are tax dollars. Now, that's $36,000 a year for one individual. I can keep him at home where he really belongs and where we want him for far less. But surely, a child like this deserves to stay out of an institution, and unless there's compensation, you simply cannot do it.
At least 6 nations provide compensation for vaccine-related injuries. They are Great Britain, which has made tax-free awards of $20,000 each to just under 600 DPT victims, Japan, France, Denmark, West Germany, and Switzerland. Only one state in this country has a compensation program, California. It's been in effect since 1979. Its first award, a 3-month-old DPT victim. The only time the U.S. government has compensated victims was for adverse reactions to the swine flu vaccine. It has, however, commissioned 2 studies to try to determine the cost of an overall vaccine compensation program. It was determined the cost per DPT victim could be as high as $890,000. No legislation has ever been introduced. The official position?
The position of the Department of Health and Human Services has been that there is not as yet evidence that such a system is needed.
Thousands of children get the P part of the DPT shot and apparently suffer few consequences. However, some children have suffered learning disabilities and severe brain damage as a direct result of the shot. There is no way of knowing how many DPT victims there are in the United States, but there certainly are far more than the medical community or the government would like to admit. The government has known about serious reactions to the DPT shot for 40 years. Its one and only study in 1978 showed a very high rate of reaction to the shot, but that study has virtually been ignored. So has the evidence that other countries have found that whooping cough is probably not the dread disease it used to be, and the vaccine may not be as effective as previously thought. We have found in our investigation of the DPT shot that many doctors and nurses are misinformed about just which children are at risk if they are given the vaccine. We have also found most doctors that see reactions to the shot do not report them to the government or the manufacturers or to parents. We have found vaccines have been allowed on the market with little effectiveness or safety data, and that the test for determining those things is faulty in itself. What is perhaps the most disconcerting about all of this is that states and private doctors have blindly followed the lead of the government in making this shot mandatory, while at the same time we found some doctors themselves have chosen not to give the P part of the vaccine to their own children, choosing instead to give just the D and the T. Our objective has been to provide information so there can be an informed discussion about whooping cough. The dilemma for parents remains.
I would certainly vaccinate my child, yes.
I would probably advise against it if the rest of the community were getting the pertussis.
Much more is to be gained by immunizing the children with our current vaccines with its limitations than by allowing our children to be exposed to contracting pertussis.
I feel that the vaccine should not be used is because the vaccine today represents a much greater threat than the whooping cough itself does.
I recommended in writing to my daughter so that she could take this letter to her pediatrician. We don't normally communicate that formally. That my grandsons receive the D and the T component of DPT, but not the pertussis component.
I believe it should be given to every child in the United States, with the exception of very rare children in which there is a specific reason not to.
I believe that the risk of damage from the vaccine is now greater than the risk of damage from the disease.
I don't believe we have reached a stage in this country with pertussis where we have approached the stage where vaccination is more hazardous than the risk of disease.
It's all right. That's one of those things little boys have to have. You'll see, it's all gone already.